Stuart Holman here again for Growing Disciples. Welcome back to our series on the book of Genesis. Today focusing on Isaac's twin sons, Esau and Jacob, spanning Genesis chapters 25 through 36. And today we're going to focus more on Jacob than Esau, but you can't really understand Jacob in total isolation from his brother. As we saw in yesterday's devotional, the root of the conflict between these twin brothers is the blessing of God. Who would get it? Now, when God made his covenant promise to Abraham about blessings that would flow from their relationship, these blessings were to be inherited by just one particular son. In Abraham's case, it was Isaac, not Ishmael, nor any of Abraham's 6 other sons conceived with his second wife Keturah after the death of his first wife Sarah. So, one generation on, the question of who would inherit God's blessing from Isaac drives a lengthy conflict between the twins Rebekah bore to Isaac. Would it be Esau? Would it be Jacob? Before the twins were even born, God tells their mother Rebekah that the outcome will be such: 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Now, the older of the twins was Esau, emerging from Rebekah's womb first, but with his brother Jacob grasping Esau's heel, following on immediately afterwards. In this battle to inherit God's blessing from Abraham, we know, and Rebekah knew from the outset, that Esau would end up serving Jacob, the older serving the younger. Which begs the question as to what would have happened if both Rebekah and Jacob just trusted God's word and aligned themselves with God's purpose in the way that Abraham had learned to do so, instead of constantly trying to manipulate and wrangle circumstances in Jacob's favour. First, it was Jacob who seized his opportunity to gain advantage. Esau was famished, he'd been out hunting, but Jacob refused to give him some food unless he sold him his birthright. In Genesis 25 we read, "Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, 'Quick, let me have some of that red stew, I'm famished.' That is why he was also called Edom, meaning red. Jacob replied, 'First sell me your birthright.' 'Look, I'm about to die,' Esau said. 'What good is the birthright to me?' But Jacob said, 'Swear to me first.' So Esau swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. In other words, Esau cared so little for his status as the firstborn of Isaac's sons that he sold that position to Jacob for the princely sum of a pot of lentil stew. And while this may not seem like a big deal, the writer of the book of Hebrews gives some further insight into the heart of Esau at this moment. In Hebrews 12 we read, "See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done." The point here is that Esau cared little for God's blessing because he cared little for God. He didn't value God's blessing until it was gone, and then it was too late. So in Jacob's defense, Esau sold his birthright very cheaply indeed. But that's surely only part of this story, because for most of Genesis chapters 25 through 36, Jacob comes across as a deceptive and meanly opportunistic person. The name Jacob, he grasps the heel, has the sense of supplanting and displacing the rightful owner of something. Jacob grasps at every advantage he can to advance his own cause, particularly that he would inherit Isaac's wealth and the promises of God given first to Abraham and then inherited by Isaac. But he does not always act alone. His mother Rebekah seems to have been a pretty good one at manipulating and deceiving old Isaac to ensure that his blessing went to Jacob rather than Esau. In chapter 27, Rebekah dresses up Jacob as Esau and fools old Isaac so that he solemnly bequeaths God's blessing to him. Now, as soon as Esau finds out, he plans to kill Jacob. But Rebekah warns Jacob, who does a runner, and he lives more than 20 years as a stranger in foreign lands, rather than enjoying the blessings of the land of promise. Many years pass with Jacob in exile. He's back in the territories of Abraham's brothers and cousins. Jacob marries twice to both of Laban's daughters. He has kids, and he starts accumulating his own wealth. Unsurprisingly, Jacob gains advantage in Laban's household by deception and funny business, I suppose. This goes on until a turning point is reached. Genesis 30:43. In this way the man Jacob grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." So Jacob heads back towards the home of his father Isaac, but something happens along the way, something good, which marks a significant turning point in his life. On his way back, Jacob meets God personally in some way or another. The nature of this encounter seems to have been a dream of some kind, but yet it's also involving a kind of a battle of wills in prayer. Completely alone, stripped of his pride and all of the signs of his wealth, Jacob wrestles all night with a man who represents God. What's the wrestling match all about? Jacob wants God's blessing so much that he will not let go. Although by now he was a wealthy man in his own right, it was God's blessing that mattered so much to him. In the end, God affirms Jacob will indeed inherit the promises made to Abraham. And so God gives him a new name, Israel. If Jacob was a name with a slightly dubious meaning, what's the meaning of his new name? Well, God says, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome. Now, this transformational moment is the prelude to Jacob, Israel, returning home to meet Esau. As a result of this personal encounter with God, Jacob, Israel, humbles himself before God and before Esau, and so a reconciliation takes place. Now, at this halfway point in Jacob Israel's story, as we reflect on his life to date, the driver of everything that has happened, his passion, his obsession, is to be the inheritor of God's promises and blessing. Although he returned to his father's household a very wealthy man, with wives and children and much power, the one thing that mattered to Jacob Israel was God's blessing, which amounted to so much more than material wealth and prosperity. In contrast to Esau, above all else, Israel wanted God, God Himself. And as we ponder our own hearts today, I wonder to what extent we yearn for God, to know Him, to be near Him. Can I encourage you to pray about that in a few moments? Now, earlier we wondered how God might have orchestrated the narrative if Jacob and Rebekah had just simply trusted God's word at his birth. What if integrity and humility reigned over deception and manipulation? Is there a lesson for us there? Now, of course, God's purpose would never have been thwarted, announced at the birth of the twins, and so despite his unworthiness and his many failings, Jacob Israel becomes the emblem of those who are chosen by God for blessing. God sovereignly decides this for no reason discernible to us, but it is so, and it will not be changed. And if we are Christians, we too are chosen by God in this same sense. We are chosen by God by His divine and sovereign will, not because of anything we have done, nor any quality about us. We are simply the trophies of His grace, the ones upon whom He has set His love. And in light of this, I wonder what you think the appropriate response to God might be. Perhaps you might think on these questions particularly and then pray. How and when might you meet with God personally, as did Jacob, such that there is actually opportunity for you to change? How might you cultivate your desire for God and His blessings? What do you think is the appropriate response to being chosen by God for blessing?